Hi there. Welcome to Hockey Nation. Yes, Hockey Nation Sports History and Canadian Identity. So today I just want to introduce myself to you, and then I'll put in a bit of a plug for doing Canadian sport history and Canadian sport history itself. It's a fascinating history, very interesting, one that most of us know very little about, most Canadians. And that's true whether it's the history of hockey or all the other sports that we're going to be looking at in this course, and we're looking at a real range going way back. Okay, and then I want to talk about the main themes of this course. Okay, so yeah, let's get started. Okay, and the first thing I should do, introduce myself. There's my email address. My commitment to you this year is to always get back to you as fast as reasonably possible. If I don't get back to you within a day, definitely email me again. It means it fell through the cracks. Okay, so I kind of pride myself in quick responses. I don't want you to come to the end of the course and say I couldn't get a hold of him, inaccessible. 100%, that's not the way. Okay, so. To that end too, I'd love to get to know you face to face in an online universe. We miss that human contact, so doing that one-on-one time with you if you want. I don't mind doing that at all, and in fact, I would love to do that, and perhaps on campus or grabbing a drink or going for a run. And in fact, I run quite a bit. I'm often at the lake at Elk and Beaver Lakes here in Victoria, and we can pick a time that works for you to do that. Okay, so pretty flexible and open to that as well. And you have some great conversations and going for a run. It doesn't have to be at a certain speed. I'm open to anything. But yeah, that's on the table, and that's sincerely made. And I hope a few of you take me up on that. I've made some great friends among the student population over the years doing that, and some running partners for decades. Okay, so speaking of decades, who am I? Well, I was born in 1967 in Thunder Bay, a long, long time ago. That does sound long ago. That's the last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup that long ago. Okay, and I was born in Thunder Bay. Okay, and that is this northern Ontario town, the same one that the Stahl brothers come out of, Eric, Mark, Jordan, and Derek. And actually, in that same Dutch Christian Reformed community that is pretty tight there. And Thunder Bay being a great example, and that family being a great example of one of the themes we'll look at in this course, which is these small northern towns and how the unstructured play and the long winter seasons that contribute to an extraordinary amount of NHL players, right? And creative play that comes out of that. And Ken Dryden talks about that in the great book, The Game, which you'll hear about a bunch in this course. But yeah, those long evenings in he wasn't in a small northern city, but the same deal of these long winter seasons and long hours of unstructured play after school time. In any case, for me, growing up later in southern Ontario in a smaller town, the Friday nights were all about going to Memorial Arena and skating, and that's what everybody did, right? That was the big highlight of the week, is the Friday night skate, and every town had a Memorial Arena, it seemed like. So, yeah. Was I great at hockey when I went in it? No, most of us are not are not made for going professional. But yeah, the closest I got to hockey success actually was in high school with Gary Volk, and I moved to Edmonton in 1979, the same year that the Oil Kings become the Oilers. So I'm there for a pretty exciting time. And what then was a pretty small city, about 400,000 people in 1979 when we moved there. That's where I met my wife, who was also already, as you can see in these pictures, a bit of an Oilers groupie. There she is with Messier and Gretzky, and one of her pictures of Gretzky. And her and a bunch of girls from school would hang out there on the East Ramp and chat them up. And in any case, great times. And in fact, I was working for Edmonton Northlands. Maybe this is the closest I got to hockey fame, working for Northlands for about 8 years in the 80s during their dynasty years. And I remember very well 1988, the big trade, because I was at work that day and all the reporters are coming to the Coliseum and this shocking moment of the big Gretzky trade. Anyway, growing so that was my growing up, and then I witnessed my son was a far better athlete than I was. So in that sense, I got an idea of what sport is like for at least the millennial generation, if not quite your generation, and it was different. And one thing you learn when you have your own kids is in this kind of this time period, at least in the 90s, and as I said, my kids are millennials, but is that sport had changed towards early specialization. And that's something we're going to look at later in the course, early specialization, decline in participation, especially of young men in professional sports and in hockey, right? Growing up in Victoria, my son did not get into hockey as much. The opportunities here are not the same. Anyway, and he chose actually the one career that can get you a varsity scholarship here in Canada, and maybe some of you are on it, which is volleyball. Unfortunately, UVic does not have a men's volleyball varsity option anymore. They used to. In any case, a lot of Canadian kids grow up wanting to do the basketball thing. That's pretty much a non-starter because your competition is just insane. So yeah. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. And watching him go through that was profoundly instructive about how important sports are, and the lessons that youth can get through them, right? And really a blessing on the whole family, living along through that, right? Good experience, right? Travel, teamwork, learning to deal with stress, right? And sports being one of those places where you really have to learn to deal with failure. It's where else do we still challenge youth, right? Where else is it still really about merit? But also, sport has changed in that it's much more competitive and much more difficult to break in, and it helps that he's a freak of nature, right? This product of centuries of Dutch inbreeding at 6'6", right? And we'll talk about that later in the course too. Changing body styles, changing technologies, going hand in hand, and maybe you know this, that 17% of people that are 7 feet tall are already in the NBA. Okay, so yeah. In any case, there's a real change in what used to be the all-round athlete earlier in the century to what it was by late century and today, and that's one of the fascinating things as well. But yeah. You'll never be less cynical about the sports world than when your own kid is in it and screaming at the TV as you're paying for youth sports and watching them play. So pretty great experience all around. And that, yeah, that. But it is true. It's much tougher now, right? And the NCAA says just 1 in 250 college athletes go on to play professionally. Okay, so you take the lessons it offers. Hopefully, you don't get injured, and in fact, that's another part of the story of sport, as you know, right? And unfortunately, that did happen to my son as well, and that was a career-ending injury, right? And that can happen. That's the lottery of sport. Any case, but lots of great lessons, and that you can take with you for the rest of your life. Okay, so that's a bit about me and my family, other than the fact that I continue to see the value in sports, and for me now, it's really just running, and that's one of those things that has a really long career trajectory. You can run for literally for decades, and there's just a slow tapering as you do that over the years. My first ultra, in fact, was not till 2024. Anyway, next point, and that gets to the slide I'm at now. I want to deal with the elephant in the room, which I assume is the elephant in the room, which is the idea that Canada and Canadian history is not exciting and not relevant and not important. Okay? And this is, in the end, a course in Canadian history. So this notion that our history is not interesting, if you have it, I don't want to put it in your mind if it doesn't exist, but I'm kind of assuming it's out there because I hear it enough. And it probably goes back to high school. That's the consistent theme you hear from people. That's if you're Canadian. For American students, I'm sure you got zero Canadian content in high school. So any case, but high school is when your teachers had to get through this mandated curriculum, and many people come out of that with a really bad taste. That they weren't really connecting to it at all. And worst case, it was just an information dump of dates and names. Okay? Now, the other thing is, though, and I want to challenge you in this, as Canadians, we're not good at celebrating our past. And that feeds into the sense that we don't really have much to talk about. Right? We really often believe that. And here's the thing, and as I hope you learn in this course, I know you will, is we do have a lot to talk about. And in sports, we absolutely have a lot to celebrate. Yet, that said, you go back more than, say, the 70s, and ask people about Canadian sports, and it's a fog. Okay, again, we don't know our history. And now, if it was a face-to-face lecture at this point, and this course used to be, I asked students to name for me some American pre-World War II athletes. Okay, so think on that. Nobody has a problem doing that. Okay, so and invariably, inevitably, you'll get the names Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson, right, Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, lots of American sports legends. Canadian, and then I ask, name me some pre-World War II Canadian sports heroes. And I'm really impressed if I even get one name. And maybe maybe that's the same for you. I'm assuming it is. A few of you perhaps have heard of Howie Morenz of the Habs, but probably not. You'll learn about him in this course. But here's the thing. Maybe this is not because of the athletes themselves and their quality vis-a-vis these American names I just gave you, but maybe the difference is really the difference between Canadians and Americans in celebrating ourselves, particularly in the past. We were not loud and proud people, right? Certainly we were not in the past, even if that is changing now. And that's really why we don't know more, and there is a lot to know. And yeah, you will get them here in this course. One of them is Tom Longboat. He was the fastest distance runner in the world in his day. Okay, this is a guy from the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, Ontario, the same town that Gretzky is from. Another big name in Canadian big sports legend was Torchy Pedden. Okay, he's a world famous athlete. He's the world champion in the 6-day bike race. That used to be a thing. People coming out to velodromes and watching people race for 6 straight days. Okay, he's the world champion in that and a bunch of other races throughout the 1930s. Okay, he's from Victoria, BC. His dad owned a flower store right downtown. If you go downtown Pandora and Store Street, you look up, you'll see Pedden Flower at the top of one of these old brick buildings. Right, that was his father's business. Any case, really big name, nationally famous, and in England, and took all sorts of speed records, and as I said, the 6-day world champion. Bobby Rosenfeld, all-round athlete. She plays hockey. She plays tennis. She's an Olympian, track and field star. She's the leader of this all-star female track team in the 1920s that are that defeat all comers. Okay, we have the strongest track and field team in the 1920s. She goes on to be a broadcaster. You'll learn about her in this course. And is internationally known. Louis Cyr, another big name globally, French-Canadian lifter, probably the strongest man ever, right? And yeah, he inspires Joe Weider, who becomes the godfather of pro weightlifting. Okay, so many big names like this, and I'm just scratching the surface here. Then in team sport, you've got, and you'll learn about this too, the Edmonton Grads. Dimes to dollars, you've never heard of them, but they're incredible. They win the first women's world title in basketball. This is 1924. They go on to win 95% of their games. Okay? An incredible, still the highest winning percentage of all time of professional sports teams, and that was over a 25-year period. Okay? So this is between 1915 and 1940. Now, the one constant here is their coach, his name is Percy Page, and again, an important person in Canadian sport history because he really took coaching to a whole new level. He is introducing the era of the professional coach of scientific principles. and we're getting into in the 1920s the era of the salaried coaches, and we'll talk about that too. That shift towards professionalism from amateurism. That's a big theme in the course as well. But yeah, it's also a Canadian. By the way, Percy Page basically owned these women, this rotating. He took that scientific principles to a whole new level in some ways. Yeah, the women were not allowed on his team. Were not allowed to get married. Once they were out. Okay, so that's a level of control that he had, and it was also a part of that incredible success that he had. But it's amazing because they're up against a lot of competition south of the border. Which is a good segue to talk about the fact that it's basketball is exploding in the States in the 1920s and 30s, but it's a Canadian, incidentally, who invents basketball, and that's James Naismith of Montreal. He's a chaplain, he's a school phys ed teacher, and he writes the original rule book for basketball in 1891. And yeah, he lives to see it take off, first in the Olympics, where it's introduced in 1904, and then in the NCAA in the 30s, and then league basketball with the establishment of the forerunner of the NBA, which is also in the 1930s. And then there's those that we do know and you will recognize and that we are rightly proud of. And here's a short list. Victoria's own Steve Nash, NBA two-time MVP. Donovan Bailey, fastest time ever recorded when he ran just over 27 miles an hour, incredibly, in 1996, 27.1. Unfortunately, Usain Bolt broke that about 10 years later, that Olympic record with a 27.8. Yeah, and then you got Hayley Wickenheiser, 4 Olympic golds, 7 world championships, first woman to play full-time on a men's semi-pro hockey league. Also happens to be a doctor and more recently assistant GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Gordie Howe, there's a name that you know, probably Mr. Canada, as he's sometimes called. He spends an incredible 32 seasons in the NHL. And almost all of those are after when he was 21. He had this massive injury that almost killed him. That's in 1950. It's the first game of the playoffs. He's playing for Detroit, and he crashes through the boards head first, without a helmet, of course, and fractured his skull, brain hemorrhage, miraculously is saved by the doctor and recovered, and even more incredibly, he's back in training by the fall. And on the advice of his doctor, he's wearing a helmet, but only for a little while. He gets rid of that, and he gets right back to his very physical style of play. If anything, it more so afterwards. But yeah, that speaks to a very different time in hockey history when we didn't talk about long-term cognitive issues of multiple concussions, which he definitely suffered. And maybe you know this too, that helmets are only finally mandated in the NHL in 1979, 1980. So yeah, lots here to celebrate. And if anything, when it comes to sports, our story is definitely not boring. Now, the other main theme of this course, and in fact, it's right in the title of the course, is Canadian identity in sport, right? And sport is absolutely central to, like for many nations, to our identity. And no sport more so than ice hockey. And we see that all the time. Here's some recent examples, well, fairly recent. You definitely saw it, that hockey is a religion in Canada with the funeral, the incredible funeral for that tragic highway accident that took 16 players in Saskatchewan, the Humboldt Broncos, right? Just a beautiful service, incredible. And of course, all the notables in Canada there, including Pierre Trudeau at the time, our Prime Minister, right? Squirming a bit because the service was a bit too specifically religious, talking about Jesus and whatnot. That always made JT uncomfortable. But in any case, you saw there a real civic religion, that sport. Hockey is that in Canada, right? These guys are the embodiment of the Canadian hero. And that was on full display in this service that was televised and broadcast nationally live. You see it too in the Four Nations face-off, right? Which is this return of the Canada Cup after an 8-year absence, and this it's just the latest iteration, or one more iteration of that rivalry with the states, right? And that's just and how important it was at that point, especially in that year of 51st state talk and all the rest, that we had to win against the Americans, and did. Right, you see the importance of sport to our identity in how important it is for politicians to lose the nerd the classroom nerd image, and get out there, lace up their skates, and you saw that with Mark Carney in March of 2025. Lacing up to play morning practice with the Oilers, right? And yeah, he's from Edmonton, so that's legit. Not scaring any of those players about taking their jobs, but in any case, yeah, getting his political bona fides that way, right? Because he knows Canadian identity is wrapped up in sport, particularly hockey, right? And the hockey metaphors are constant in political lingo, and once you start paying attention to that, you'll see it all the time. So yeah, core to our identity, and a lot to celebrate, but also a lot of dark side here as well, and that's become increasingly clear also in the last several years. And we all know about the trial of the 5 players in the minor league in Ontario, and EM, the complainant in that case, and group sex in a hotel room with young men, and so that ugly side of this hypermasculine sporting culture, right? And for a big name on this, Rick Westhead, who first broke that story, and he has a book called We Breed Lions. He gets at the fact that all sports have this, right? All sports, any institutional any institution has these negative sides to them, right? Because human institutions are always fallible. But he says there's something unique about hockey in that you get these, especially at the junior level, you'll have these 15-year-olds playing along with these 21-year-olds who will never be professional will never make the NHL, but on the same team. And those 15-year-olds are very, very, they want anything, will do anything to fit in, right? So that kind of a culture where the older guys are very dominant, and often in pretty negative ways, the community that they create, right? And yeah, so there is definitely something ill in the junior hockey system. Okay? And that, again, was on full display in the trial of these 5 players. Right? Other problems, and Ken Dryden again, here's his name again. He wrote this great book called Game Change not too long ago, basically calling out Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, to get serious on finishing the check on head hits, right, and concussion. And that is one thing where the NHL has really dragged its heels compared to other professional sports agencies. But yeah, so there are these sides definitely that we want to be alive to, and towards the end of the course, we'll talk a bit about that, the problems in professional sport today, right? But not to take away from the fact, and some people draw a straight line from that then and simply write off sport as this hypermasculine, this site of hypermasculine patriarchy and all the rest of that, and there are academics that do that this is on balance a negative, right? And I completely reject that argument, and for a couple of very good reasons. And one of them is simply this: that in that darkest chapter that we have in our Canadian history, it's definitely got to be the attempted assimilation of First Nations people through residential schools, right? And all of us know that and appreciate that. But in this really dark chapter, the one bright light that we find, one that we do find here, is sports, right? Hockey. And here we have a great example of that. This is Willie Littlechild. He becomes an MP and was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission commissioner. And he says this: hockey saved my life coming out of residential school. I was going down the wrong path in terms of alcohol and drinking. I could end up on Skid Row somewhere, beaten to death or drunk, but hockey was always there. Right? So he becomes a Canadian Sports Hall of Famer, and he founds and coaches the first all-Indigenous hockey team in Alberta. goes to U of A. That's his alma mater. Later on in the course, we'll be looking at the alkali braze as an example of exactly this bright light in a very dark chapter in our history. The other thing is that hockey is not a site of male hegemony, okay? And in fact, hockey is declining among young men in Canada participation. It's on the uptick among women, right? Also among immigrants that come to Canada, right? Within 10 years, it becomes their favorite sport, viewing sport. And we know that. There's statistics on that. And so it's not exclusionary at all, right? And that's where we'll end the course as well, talking about the rise of gender participation and the incredible rise of women's professional hockey in recent years. It's made some amazing strides. Another point I wanted to make to you today, and we're coming towards the end of this lecture, by the way, is that we've come a long way, and in some ways in some ways the battles and issues that we fight in sport today are the same ones that we've had for over 100 years. Here's a great example for Canadian sport history of a bit of both. And this is Canada's first trial for manslaughter during a hockey game. It's the first time somebody gets charged for the death of another player, which is not something still that we think of when it happens in the context of a sporting event. But this happens for good reason. It's when 24-year-old Alcide Laurent is beaten to death, beaten to death on the ice by 19-year-old Alan Loney. Now this happens in small town Eastern Ontario. It's 1905. Loney is charged, but the jury lets him off. And why does the jury let him off? Well, it turns out Alcide Laurent was French Catholic from a mainly French Catholic town. Loney is English Protestant from the neighboring English town where the trial is being held. So the trial, the jury being made up of the local electors being English, they're biased. And that gets at an important cultural fact that we have this intense English-French rivalry that goes back to before Confederation, and it's definitely always been fought out on the ice. Okay? But there's more than this too. If you take another look, you find out there had been other deaths in hockey games before this. So then why is Loney the first to be charged with manslaughter? Why is this the first trial? Well, one thing is because of timing. Okay, and at this time, some players are being paid, not all of them. So this is an important point of context. This is a way to historicize this. There's this concern at the time that paid players, that's causing more violence, commercialism, right? That's really what's on trial here, right? The older model being amateurism. So there's a belief in 1904 that money corrupts the game. Paying players taints them, they become too competitive, winning becomes too important, and we get this uber level of violence, right? Over love of the game and sportsmanship. So the trial here really is over sporting attitude. So really fascinating what you get when you drill down. And that's a good reminder for us to come towards the end of this lecture on that sport reflects culture. That's what this story reminds us. And that's really the through line for the entire course. That's sports change all the time, and that change reflects the broader cultural shifts. So sport reflects culture. And FYI, that's also really all that history is, all that we do, is we look at and we try to explain change over time. Right? We try to explain, as historians, that's really all we're doing. We're trying to explain change over time, which means not what happens, but why it happens. And here's one example I'll give you. There used to be almost no NHL players from British Columbia. Today it's 10% in some years, last Olympic team 20%. So what was the change? And if you're racking your brains, it's this: hockey moved indoors. Okay, so most people live in the Lower Mainland and on the island where there is no consistent winter ice, as you know. But that changes, and it changes first with the first artificial indoor ice rinks, and those were the Denman Arena in Vancouver and the Victorian Arena here in Victoria, both built in 1911 by the Patrick family, and we'll get to that in the course as well. And they build those to launch their new Pacific Coast Hockey Association League, the PCHA, which, by the way, completely revolutionizes the game. Again, you'll find out more about that. But fast forward from then to today, Vancouver today has apparently, as of last standing, 39 hockey rinks. Okay, and it's the mid 20th century when you really have that big shift. That's when the big shift happens, where more of us are learning the game, learning to skate indoors than outside. Okay, so again, just a simple point for you of that, what history has changed through time, and that sport reflects culture. So I'll just quickly list the main themes that we're going to look at in the course, and loosely, because there's others as well that you'll get out of the course, but let's just go there for 1 second, then I'll close. Okay, and finally, here's some of the themes of the course, and not exclusive, but who we play, who we play, what is sport is where we start. Then we look at First Nations in sport. We look at sport in British North America, early days, including the creation of hockey, 1875, Creighton, and all the rest of that. We look at the history of, spend a park for a bit on the history of lacrosse in Canada. That's a big theme in the course, also specifically in British Columbia, where it's exceptional. We also look at the origins of organized sport, Montreal being a big thing there, Canada and the Olympics and the Winter Olympics, industrialization and how that changes sport. We get the evolution of modern sports out of that. We look at the war between amateurs and professionalism and paid game, sports and identity, which is throughout the course really, and then women in Canadian sport history, gender, violence and injury, sports and big business, and commercialism, bringing us more to recent times. Okay, so that is where we're going, and here's the structure of the course itself. So let's look at that, and the meat of it, your final grade, how that's going to be determined. Okay, so this is I really think it's a good product we got for you here, and there is no essay component, and that's partly a function of the numbers that we have. It's also my acknowledgement of the fact that we're in this new world of AI, and I don't really enjoy trying to figure out what is not AI. But we've done this model already before ChatGPT came out, and it's working quite well. Okay, so the backbone of the course is these history episode tests. Now this is the hockey history of Canada. It's a really well done series. It's getting a bit older now, but it's not at all dated. It is, after all, history. Here's a book that it's based on. If you want to borrow this from me, it's a pretty cool book, or I mean, the book that came out of it. And it sits around my office, doesn't get much use. So yeah, so you'll take as many as 8 of these quizzes if you want. You only have to take as many as you want, and you only each one is worth 4%. So your best 5. If you take all 8, you want to strategize a game it that way. Yeah, 100%. That's your choice, and then the best 5 will be your result. So people tend to do quite well on those. Okay, they're timed, and that is the biggest issue, is remembering what happens in a 45-minute video about our hockey game, the hockey history, and trying to remember it for the open book quiz. Obviously, open book. Everything is Fenema. Okay, so and then we have a midterm at the end of week 5, 25%, and I'll give you more tips on that as we come closer, and there's more to read about in the course about that. Also, second midterm, then end of week 9, same amount, and then the final exam at the end of the course, 30%. Okay, so that is the story and the glory. There's a textbook for the course as well that I expect you to keep up with and read as you go through. Let me just grab it off my shelf here and wave it in front of your face. So it's this one. Okay, Don Morrow and Wamsley. This is the 4th edition of Sport in Canada history. Okay, and it's a great one. Okay, the early textbooks in sport history were pretty lame, I have to tell you. They've gotten a lot better. You might even want to keep it when the course is done. Not a ton of the test questions come out of this, just a few, but you'll want to have it so that you can maximize your points there and maximize your what you get out of the course, right? Okay, so I think that's it. Oh, the other thing about that text is you can get an online version of that for much cheaper, and it's temporary, right? So that allows you to do a word check, right? In a much more convenient. All right, I'm going to close there. As I said, I think we have a pretty good product for you here, and I really hope you enjoy it. And I really would like to get to meet you and know you. So pop into my weekly Zoom time, if nothing else, and perhaps set up a time to get together. All right, thanks for listening. Any questions, let me know.